There's never been a better time to have SiriusXM. With even more exclusive content, with over 150 channels in your vehicle, including the widest, deepest variety of music, ad-free. Root for your team. Get news. Listen to whatever makes you laugh. And hear all about your favorite stars. Your Platinum Plan offer includes more than ever before to enjoy online, on your phone, or at home. Create your own ad-free personalized stations powered by Pandora. Hear ad-free extra channels filled with music and enjoy favorite shows with SiriusXM Video. Thousands of hours of shows and performances on demand. What you love is on now.
So we're deep into the car audio sessions, and today we've landed on a very unique brand and product. It's all about Audiomobile today on today's session, because Audiomobile may not have the largest, widest range of product, but what they do very specifically and do it very well. We've got Ramesh as well as MATT OVERPECK from Audiomobile in the studio with us today. This one you don't want to miss. This is CMA Connected, presented by SiriusXM, Audiomobile, and it starts now. So if you haven't heard of Audiomobile yet, you've come to the right show. Today on CMA Connected, we're going to be diving deep with the brand and with MATT OVERPECK, who is the specialist at the brand. I'm your host, Ben Wu, and thank you for joining us. Audiomobile, let's find the story about it. Let's get their Canadian distributor, Importel, online. I did mention Ramesh. He is their 12-volt expert. Let's see what Ramesh has to say. What's going on, Mr. Ramesh?
Hey, Ben. How are you?
I'm pretty excited. We're deep into the car audio sessions, and for me, that's really fun because hold on, let me rephrase that. I don't want to say that the motorcycle and the power sports and the marine aren't fun, but for me, car audio is where it all started. So there's a little bit extra interest from my point of view. I don't know about you, but when it comes to car audio at large.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, car audio section is what we do. That's our bread and butter. It's our happy place. Not to say there aren't other emerging fascinating markets and new things for us to learn, especially for some of us who've got a few decades under our belt. I won't date us exactly, but I think that's where Audiomobile, don't call me mobile, fits in.
Absolutely. And you know what? I mentioned that, although not the widest range, because, Audiomobile really specializes in a couple things, especially subwoofers. So what makes Audiomobile such a unique product, especially within, the offering that Importel has?
Well, I mean, let's take, I'll kind of one up you there. I'll say, not just what Importel carries, but as a market on the whole, as an overall marketplace, we really don't have a line of subwoofers that operate effectively, keyword effectively, in a very, very small enclosure. They've been optimized not necessarily for primarily mounting depth, which is something that we often defer to as an industry or as sales. How deep is it? How deep is it? How deep is it? And then we sort of focus on that. Mm-hmm. Where in reality, it's the depth does matter, obviously, as far as mounting depth, right? But we can kind of get too carried away, and it's really the volume of the enclosure that's the bigger focus. It's a lack of space or volume, or how much customization do we have to do at the shop level that translates to an expense for the consumer, and maybe prices the whole job out of the attainability of the customer, just because we're trying to get every cubic inch out of the space that's there. Mm-hmm. So if we needed a 0.75 or 0.8 or a larger enclosure, sometimes we already have these solutions in our barn. The problem is the vehicle or the application, or how much space the person, like even me with a trunk, as I'd mentioned to you before, backstage,
is willing to give up.
Right? I just don't want to give up that space.
Exactly.
I have a trunk. There's lots of space. I don't want to give up that space, but I do want output, and there's a balance. there's a balance typically with performance based on that space. So Audiomobile, their focus has been to design a subwoofer that works in an incredibly absolutely bizarrely small enclosure.
Freakishly, I've heard the term used. Freakishly small.
The term freakishly, I was trying to stay away from it. I want to steal someone else's patent trademarked statement, or wording. But I mean, that's really what the focus is. So that gives the salespeople all kinds, and the consumer, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want this much output, or this much jam, or this much party in my trunk or my truck, or whatever it is. Within that same enclosure volume we would have typically used maybe for a single driver, we're now able to do 2 drivers.
Understood.
Or for duals, we can do 4, and we're not compromising the performance and the output of the solution, of what we're offering the end user.
I have 2 comments.
I have
2 comments. The first thing, to your comment about the shallow subs, it's a little bit confusing, because I've seen marketing promotion about these shallow subs. So I understand the mounting depth. There are certain situations where you can only be so deep. Got it. But then I look at the specifications of what they recommend as enclosure size space, and I'm like, hold on a second. Okay, it's this shallow, but I still need a 1.5 cubic feet for a 10. Like this, I don't understand.
Right. Like, I'm just throwing numbers out there, and I'm not throwing any particular manufacturer under the bus, right? They'll be, okay, we have X, super slim, super whatever, but we need 0.75 cubic feet sealed, which is fine. It's much smaller than 1 cubic foot for a 10 sealed.
Sure.
Like, that's great. But I still don't, or I do have 0.75. If we fiberglass the hell out of, whatever that,
really maximizing that crevice,
that real estate, right? And that's great. But now we're fiberglassing a box. If I could build a, 6-sided box with a hole in the top in that same space and not have to use all of it for the consumer, and just, we can put a beauty plate on it or make it look really nice on the outside, or carpet it. It's a win. It's a win for the consumer. It's a win for everybody. And your car doesn't have to be there for a day and, blah, 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 blah. Right.
Okay. So obviously super unique product, right?
Right.
What are you most excited to learn about today?
I'm excited to learn about performance versus depth and how this stuff works, because in theory it shouldn't. There's nobody else. If
there's a mad scientist
behind this.
There's mad scientists behind this.
There is a mad amount of science.
All right. On that note, we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get to the source of all of this curiosity, I'll call it, and we're going to go ahead from California. World. We're going to bring him in. He is the VP of Sales for Audiomobile. His name is Matt Overpeck. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Howdy, Ben. Howdy, Ro. How are things?
Oh, well, we are here. We're doing well, first of all. Thank you for asking. But second of all, we are puzzled on several things. One of them being the curious nature of your product, that it works in such freakishly small spaces. I know we're going to get into it. I don't want to ask you that out of the gate, but certainly it's an elephant in the room. It's what you're known for. It's what people talk about. So why don't you start off with telling me what are some of the key features and benefits that really make Audiomobile, let's call it, unique in the industry?
Okay, well, good question. Do a number of things that are sort of contrarian to the marketplace. First of all, we design our drivers to have full format excursion power handling envelopes, and then figure out a way to make them as compact as we can without compromising the desired performance envelope parameters, power handling, excursion that we require, because compared to most other companies, they will make something as shallow as they possibly can and then settle for whatever performance can be shoehorned into that form factor. We ascribe to the form follows function. So similarly, you would never make a 1-inch deep door speaker, because if you know that is going to perform terribly, if you can get away with a 2-inch door speaker, but the performance now is on par with a 3-inch deep speaker, that's a really good trade-off. So we spend more money on every part of our products to achieve the desired results. We don't do polypropylene cones, which has kind of been an industry standard for 3 decades. A lot of our technology is derived from home theater, high-end drivers, and pro sound drivers, and bringing that DNA into a car audio design studio, if you will, and creating the products really sets us apart. And we knew going back a decade or so that we had technologies that were unique and proprietary, and parlaying them to a car audio and specifically truck box application market where size matters, but especially in how small can I get away with without compromising things. And this has been even more challenging because, 10 years ago, we didn't exist in a 1,000 watt monoblock amplifier world. Now we do, right? So to us, building any subwoofer that doesn't have a full size voice coil or a handle 400 or 500 watts, why bother, right? Because if it can't take the juice, you're going to just have a problem down the road. And we like to use the analogy that, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. And similarly, dealers want to make sure when they send a system out that it goes out and stays out. Because if the customer comes back and he ain't happy, you're doing you're damage to your own brand.
I'm so happy you brought that up because obviously Audiomobile has garnered quite the loyal following. So on that note, what are some of the reasons you believe that to be, that it has this loyal following?
Well, so as I touched on before, we don't use polypropylene cones. We don't use any motor structures that are less than a full 51 plus millimeters. So we inherently have greater power handling built into our product because we use a super premium cone material, actually adapted from Pro Sound 18-inch subwoofers. This is pretty unique in the industry, and using that across our entire board, from our entry-level GT2 product up to our top-of-the-line product, it ensures that the sound quality of our products will be very, very consistent. The teal smalls on our drivers are very, very similar. They share very similar DNA. And as a result, whether you spend $300 on an Audiomobile driver or $600, they're going to sound very similar, and they will take a bunch of power. And let's face it, it's like if you build a motor for your vehicle, when you stand on the gas, you want to get your eyeballs pushed back into your head every single time without exception, not have it sputter or whatever, or go back to your tuning shop and say, dude, what up? Right?
Exactly. So I have to ask the question. I have you here. I mentioned at the top, you don't do amplifiers, you don't do coaxials and front range speakers, you don't do DSP or any OEM integration. You guys do subwoofer. So, I mean, is there a challenge to thrive in this industry with such a limited SKU selection?
Well, it's certainly originally when we started out, we only had one series of products. We're now at 3 that have been shipping for some years. We have 2 more that are, I would say, in the pipeline, except they're either in production now or will be in production in the next couple of weeks. There is a trade-off to having a much more focused strategy. The benefits are that when we go into a dealer, we don't have to say, hey, look, we have amps and speakers and subs and wire and cable and blah, blah, blah. And the first response to most retailers who are generally content with their merchandising mix will be, yeah, I don't need any of that stuff, right? It's true whether it's a consumer or a retailer. People don't buy features, they buy benefits and solutions. So we're able to walk into a dealer and say, you don't have to drop any brand that you're selling. You can just sell less of their woofers and sell more of ours, because ours will be viable. They will sound better, they will fit better, and your customers will love you long time. That's a pretty attractive proposition for your average retailer, because you're not asking him to undo anything, give away any of his brand equity that he's built up with some other brands, because if he were to dump that brand, he just goes down the street to his competition, and then his competition gets to parlay the benefits of that brand.
Right.
So we avoid that whole scenario, and that's a as they say, it's always easier, or as I like to say, easier to get the tip of the spear in the door than both feet. And once dealers try us, they're sold. Our dealers are unbelievably devout and loyal, because in fact, one of our dealers once said we're sort of the car audio equivalent of like the Teflon Don, meaning nothing sticks to us. Well, what he really meant is we're super sticky, because dealers, if they could replace us, because we've had inventory struggles over the years in the past, if they could find something like ours, they'd have shifted to it. They don't. They always come back to us because we really can't get anything like our stuff.
Fair enough.
Right.
Uniqueness. And you
And
on the sorry, just
sorry,
before you go, Ramesh.
yeah.
I just wanted to mention you
Mhm.
mentioned dealer. Well, we do have a dealer on the show a little bit later on that's going to be joining us. His name is Jason Stearns. He represents Andre's Car Audio over in BC, and I can't wait
Yep.
to ask him some questions to see what he says. You were saying, Ramesh.
So you were talking about OE integration, and what's kind of funny is a lot of the OE vehicles have come with eights, like some of the trucks, Mustang, blah 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 blah. This is one of the only eights that would actually fit in that enclosure and have a significant output difference. There are a few other eights that fit into that location, but they don't have a significant ability to create more or have more stroke, right?
Fair enough.
So more travel. So it is kind of neat because it can be an OE integration tool as well. Just to
Fair enough.
We have had a number of dealers literally take a low quality OEM woofer in a plastic enclosure, line it with, whatever kind of damping material or fiberglass it or whatever, but basically keep that form function because it's an organic shape. It has to fit nooks and whatever, and just drop in our, an Evo 8 typically, and sometimes even an app in free air, back deck applications, and be like, holy cow, how could it be that much better, right?
Really?
But as I may have suggested before, we spend more time and money both in the development of our products and in the parts. And it's a recurring theme with our products that it's a synergy of engineering and higher quality, more expensive parts so that the 1 + 1 = 3, and the results are manifestly clear. And anybody who's used our stuff will tell you that.
Okay. Let's get to the presentation, guys. I know we got one, and Matt, I definitely want you to cover it all so we can come back with you with some questions in the discussion. So on that note, Ramesh, you and I will go away. We're going to put up this presentation for you, Matt, and we're going to pass you the mic so we can learn all about Audiomobile products.
Okay, so this is a hero shot of an Evo 10. It's our best-selling slimline, as we like to call it, subwoofer. This is done by one of our dealers in the Vancouver area in a Lamborghini. It is our drivers look really good. Obviously, this is looks like $1 million install, but you can see that this cone will be similar in all of the other drivers that we'll look at. And there's a reason for that, because if it's good enough to go on our top line product, we find a way to put it in our more cost-effective product. This is our biggest selling series. This is the GTS product. This was our entry-level product for a number of years. It works incredibly well, both sealed and vented. As you can see, this is in a Ford F-150, I think a Harley-Davidson truck. Generally, you would use these in a very small enclosure, as little as 1/3 of a cubic foot per. So that would be like 2/3 of a cubic foot for a pair of drivers. I think this box ended up being about 1.2, something like that, but it's a full width 50-inch enclosure. But as you can see, our drivers are incredibly good looking, and we pay close attention to all of the details. And as the saying goes, it's if it looks right, it probably will perform right. So here's a shot of the GTS 10 from the rear. As you can see, we use a solid pole motor, so no axial rear vent. As Ramesh mentioned earlier, it's not really the mounting depth of the woofer that is exclusively what matters. It's how deep or how large the enclosure is. This driver is 4.5 inches deep. You can put the rear of the motor right up against the back wall, and because the deepest part of it is only about 3 inches across, you can even Dremel out or put a little bit of a recess in the back wall of the enclosure and reduce the depth closer to like 4 inches or whatever. So besides the fact that this driver works in incredibly small enclosures, is super reliable. We rate it at 450 watts RMS. We have dealers run 500-600 watts to them on a regular basis. It's a little bit of a unicorn driver, frankly, and we would refer to this as the penultimate evolution of what's called an isobaric driver. We won't go into that today, but basically it's one driver that performs as if it were two in a isobaric type of mounting enclosure. Here's a good example of some of the things you can do. This is obviously in a GMC truck. That's actually 2 active 10s with 2 of our M-Car passive radiators. Total airspace for this is about 1.1, 1.2. It used to be considered small airspace for a single 10 would be about 0.5, 0.6 cubic feet. So under that architecture, you're talking 2 to 2.5 cubic foot. If this is 1.2 for all 4, that's a quantum leap difference in terms of how much piston area you can shoehorn into a very, very limited space. And just for an equivalency thing, 4 10s are equivalent to an 18-inch subwoofer. So if you can put an 18-inch subwoofer in your truck behind your back seat, that's pretty darn cool. Here's another example of putting maximum piston area in the small space. This is a Ferrari 488. This is done by our dealer in one of our dealers in Silicon Valley. That's 3 Evo 8s. Total airspace on this is under 1 cubic feet. And this has been actually replicated by other dealers and similar Ferraris. And it sounds amazing, especially considering that the total depth of that enclosure is only about 4.5 inches, maybe 5 at the deepest point. So here's a close-up of the Evo 24 10. You can see it uses a similar solid pole motor. One of the benefits of using a solid pole motor is that you literally have more steel to dissipate the heat, because whether you're talking about brakes or a motor or a loudspeaker motor, heat is the enemy, and you want to find a way to dissipate that as best as possible. We pay a lot of attention to air cooling, or what's called convection cooling, as do other manufacturers, but it's well documented that air is a terrible conductor of heat. By contrast, a conduction cooling strategy, we like to use the analogy of putting a big spoon in your coffee. That spoon, if it's large enough, it's not going to get very hot because there's a lot of steel to absorb the heat. So we spend more money because we use larger motor structures, larger voice coils, to help ensure that the drivers will remain stable and continue to sound good, even if you beat on them for an hour or two or whatever. Reliability is super important to us, probably second only to building drivers that sound fantastic. Here's a rendering exploded view of the Evo 10. You can see the large flat spider at the top, a composite mounting ring to allow us to have a large flat spider while employing a hybrid motor design where instead of having the full motor suspended behind or to the rear of the frame, the actual top plate is inside of the frame, while the magnet and the T-yoke, the rear parts of the motor, are in a traditional location. This allows us to reduce the mounting depth, but literally have geometries consistent with a driver that is 50-60% deeper without any compromise. This series of drivers actually uses a full 10mm top plate. That's what you would find in typically a 600-700 watt woofer that's 6, 7, 8 inches deep. We found a way to put it into a driver that is under 100 millimeters or 3.9 inches. Here's a 2D CAD drawing. This is of our Evo 12, which we've been shipping now for about, it's same basic motor structure as used on the Evo 10, and we've sold a lot of these. Most of our dealers tend to sell more 8s and 10s than 12s, but this driver continues the thoroughbred lineup of the Evo series, and it's done extremely well. One of the things you'll note is that at the upper part there is a very, very shallow profile cone. That cone is actually was developed for 18-inch Pro Sound subwoofers. So when you have a driver with that large a cone area, it needs to be incredibly stiff to support the energy of being pushed back and forth at high speed. We took that cone, which is actually a composite Kevlar reinforced 5-layer cone, and reduced it in size to use on our 8s, 10s, and 12s. And then the cone unit body, which is what attaches to the voice coil former, is augmented by a very shallow concave dust cap. It's made of the same material. So at the outer edges, where it's most likely for the cone to deform, it's actually 10 layers Kevlar reinforced. So that cone is incredibly well damped, It's obviously very expensive because it's like literally 2 cones of premium material, but it is super, super rigid and sounds fantastic, unlike the typical poly cones that are used by most of the leading brands. Here's an interesting install. This is done by one of our Texas dealers. This is a very common application in both GMCs and even more so with Ford F-150s. So 2 active drivers on the outside, in this case Evo 10s, but they could be GTS 10s or GT2 series, which is our entry-level product. And then in the middle, there's 2 MCAR 250s. MCAR is an acronym for Modular Coupled Acoustic Radiator. And they're basically a pre-tuned passive radiator, but optimized to be able to be downfired and used for best use in small enclosure applications, specifically trucks, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a pretty sexy application with the plexi top panels, but you can get away doing the same thing in a much more cost-effective enclosure. And again, total airspace for the 2 active drivers and the 2 radiators is somewhere between 1.1 to 1.25 cubic feet for the whole thing, or 0.625 per side. In this case, it's one big enclosure. So here's a close-up of the MCAR 250. The middle metal piece there is actually 2 separate discs. One is aluminum, one is steel. This is done to pre-tune the MCARs to approximately 34, 35 hertz in a 0.6 cubic foot box. This eliminates the need to do any additional tuning by adding any added mass or anything like that. This technology works great in as little as under a half a cubic foot, all the way up to 3/4 of a cubic foot. Changing the airspace will only change the tuning of the enclosure by a couple of hertz up or down. So it's pretty much a foolproof recipe, if you will, to get tremendous low frequency extension in an enclosure much, much smaller than you would be required to do a vented box tuned at the same frequency. Here's a good example of parlaying that. This is a high-end home theater subwoofer, typical cube shape, amplifier plate to the rear, active subwoofer to the front, and then they use a dual horizontally opposed pair of passive radiators, which basically, if these are 10s, the 2 passive radiators sum, working synchronistically or in synchrony, to create a 13-inch passive radiator driven by a 10-inch active sub. We have used this similar architecture successfully. It's a really good way to take a low power amplifier, 400 or 500 watt, let's say in a 5-channel system amplifier, and get really, really big bass with really, really low power. Because as they say in the motor building world, no replacement for displacement. The same is true of subwoofers when you're trying to move air. So here's a good graph. This kind of shows the basic trade-offs between the enclosure types. You have a sealed enclosure, which starts to roll off sooner. Again, this is in a lab. This is not including transfer function for being in a vehicle. But sealed enclosures, typically smallest, but the downside is they tend to roll off sooner unless they have some kind of EQ boost to augment that. The one that goes the deepest but then rolls off would be a bass reflex or ported or vented enclosure. The downside of that is typically the enclosure is going to be 50 to 100% larger than the sealed box. The beauty of the passive radiator or the MCAR enclosure, which is the teal colored line in the middle, is it has lower extension or greater extension than the sealed enclosure, and then it rolls off at twice the rate because of the phase inversion that happens at a certain point. But if I can have that much extra, let's call it free bass, without having to worry about port noise or the enclosure being unsuitably large, that's a trade-off I'll take every day. And this doesn't even factor into the fact that the efficiency gains of the MCARs, specifically because of the enclosure, because of the technology that we employ on them, provides efficiency actually greater than the vented box does in a box substantially smaller. So that's pretty darn cool. Almost a free lunch, if you will. So here's a recent press blurb on our newest additions to the Audiomobile family. This is what we call our Solo Pass series. Solo because it typically uses a single subwoofer in addition to one of our M-Car passive radiators. We do have a single 8 vented box, a dual 10, actually two dual 10 boxes. And the first 5 are all vehicle specific, optimized for Ford F-150s. We use the term modular because the downfire 26-inch versions can be used as a bookend, so you can put 2 of them under the seat of an F-150. This gives you a very cost-effective way to get 410s under the seat of your truck. And this can also be done in a modular manner, so you can start with a pair of 10s initially, add the other ones later, or if it's a work truck, you can party on the weekend with your 4x10 setup, and come Monday morning, you can pull one of the boxes out. You still have awesome bass, but you got half of your space under the seat back, which is pretty unique in the industry, as opposed to buying a full format enclosure where, first of all, they're going to be very, very expensive, and secondly, once that's in, it ain't coming out unless you sell the truck or whatever. So we'll be expanding the Solo Pass line over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We'll end up with about 15 SKUs, including vehicle-specific ones for 2019 and up GM Silverados and Denali's, as well as Ram platforms, both classic and the new Gen 5s, and Toyota trucks as well. So we're all in this category, and dealers love this because, as the saying goes, time is money, and this allows them to turn more systems very quickly without cutting any corners in terms of the performance, because the enclosures are US built, 1.5-inch front baffles, and specifically tuned to work with our M cars and subwoofers. So it's pretty cool. Here's an example of one of the dual 10 boxes. Because these are not, they are vehicle specific, but because of the way they are designed, they can be either upfired or downfired. This is the dual 10. This is in a BMW M3 trunk. As you can see, in this case, it's upfired. You would normally put grills on it, but we are much enamored with the ability of having enclosures that will work with an array of our drivers, with or without the M-Car transducers, that gives dealers the ability to do drop-in bass, which is vastly superior to selling prefab loaded enclosures, which are typically carpeted, rarely downfire capable, and simply are not as well built as ours, because those enclosures are typically not made in America, not using American 3/4-inch MDF. Here's another way of the modular concept. This is actually a pair of our 26-inch downfire enclosures. Normally these would be used in a left-right application under the seat of a truck, but they are stackable in this case. So there's actually 4 10s there, a 10 and an M car in each one of those enclosures. Slot port downfire on both of them. And when I say slot port, they are not ported enclosures, but the driver is downfiring and becoming a slot port because of the rectangular venting created by the downfire application. So this is a very cool way to be able to retain most of your trunk space, most of your important trunk space, which is towards the rear, and to be able to put 4 10s in the trunk without having to do all kinds of goofy angles to find a way to get the footprint that you need for 4 10s. Here's a typical application. These are actually prototypes done from a couple of years ago. We've changed the cosmetics, as you can see, and as well as the Solo Pass logo. But this is 4 10s in an F-150 in a downfire application. Incredibly great sounding, because again, 4 10s better than 2 10s, especially when there are level of drivers. And this gives you output like a pair of 13-inch vented boxes in a form factor that's pretty hard to say no to. So coming attractions, we have 5 new SKUs that are in the pipeline, or in production, or will be produced in the next few weeks. This is our new Encore 4415. There's also a matching 12-inch 4412. This is the world's first low-profile 1,000-watt subwoofer. The 12 is 4.9 inches deep. The 15 is 5.9 inches deep. So that's a 1,000-watt 15 with a 19 to 20 millimeter one-way linear X-Max Clipple verified that is not $1,000. And these are going to be wildly successful, because there are no shallow mount subs that will take more than 500 or 600 watts. Our Evo series being at the cutting edge of that, but this is a substantial increase in both power handling and excursion, while only being modestly additionally deeper and also working both sealed and vented.
All right. Thank you for that. Now, I think we also have a video, if I'm not mistaken, to kind of further illustrate this new Encore series that you're talking about. Let's go ahead and see what that's all about. Here we go. That's pretty exciting stuff there, Matt. I mean, first of all, the basket is one thing, but that whole sexy bottom piece and how shallow the overall thing is compared to how wide that woofer is, I'm going to be pretty excited to hear about how that performs in real world.
Yeah, it's consistent with our design to use generally single magnets that are a larger format. Think of the analogy that traction with tires is a function of how much rubber you can get on the road. When you talk about a magnetic circuit, you don't want narrow magnets that are stacked. That would be like having a tire that's got a really tall sidewall and very limited rubber on the road. You want, and this is if you look at any Pro Sound subwoofer, rarely will you see more than a single magnet, but they're always very, very large diameter because you want as much magnetic rubber on the road, if you will, to get as much efficiency as possible. And we're not the only company that does this, but we're certainly the leading progenitors of that technology.
And massive power handling to boot.
Yeah, that series will be a true game changer in the market because there is nothing like it, and everybody who has seen it to a man has said wow or some expletive deleted about when can I have that.
Sounds good. Matt, I'm going to give you a quick break. I've got a retailer in the back end that I want to interview real quick, and at the end, don't go far away because we're going to come back and have a quick discussion on everything we learned today. All right?
I'll be here. Thanks.
Sounds good. So in the world of car audio, especially here in Canada, Andre's Car Audio is kind of like that store out west that, got a lot going on. They've got a lot of cred. They've got a lot of accolades. And behind that is one shop, which has a store manager that we love having on the show. His name is Jason Stearns, and he is the store manager for Andre's Car Audio. Welcome to the studio. What's going on, Jay?
Hey,
good
Ben.
to see you again.
Hey, good to see you too.
I know that you are probably jacked with work, and so obviously here you are hiding in the storage room, and I appreciate that. Like you have no idea. First and foremost, for those who don't know, why don't you give us a quick background profile? Who is Jason Stearns, and what are you all about?
Well, I've worked for Andres for going on 18 years now. Working from base sales guy all the way to store manager, dabble in install as well. So, I take care of some of the detail work, CNC, 3D printing, that type of thing. Obviously the design of the actual systems themselves. So, but yeah, no.
You do a lot, in other words, but like we've had you on from everything to talk about like DSP to like power sports audio and everything in between. Now tell us about Andres. For those maybe out east that haven't heard of Andres, why don't you give us a little profile on who Andres is all about?
So we started as a really small shop back almost 40 years ago now in Kelowna, and we just slowly been expanding. We're up to, I believe, 13 full line stores, and all those stores will do car audio as well. So and we expand to all the smaller markets in all of BC, from Vancouver Island all the way to Prince George and Terrace.
Now, of all these Andre stores, are there some that are more specialized than others when it comes to mobile electronics?
Yeah, we definitely have some specialty markets. We got Marty Amachek, who just won Seller of the Year.
Never heard of him.
He's down in Courtney. He's rocking it down there. Kelowna being our biggest market, big tourist area, lots of boats. We rock it here, and we also have Dave Oakley up in Kamloops, right? So he runs a very good shop, and he's our lead buyer, so he knows what he's doing too. So.
Very good. Some great leadership, some all-star cast, really. All right, let's dig in. There's a reason we brought you on today. We want to talk to you about your experience with Audiomobile products. I know you guys have a little bit been a big fan of these, but I want to hear from the horse's mouth. What are some of the reasons that you feel make the Audiomobile products so unique amongst all the great brands that you sell?
Yeah, it's a different type of animal for the type of subwoofer game. It's a game changer for the way we designed enclosures, what we're able to put into vehicles now. We do a lot of trucks in our area, so having a nice shallow mount woofer that performs in such a small box was absolutely amazing. There's a lot of shallow woofers out there. They either sound okay in a small box, or they need a really big box. They can be really shallow, but they need a cubic foot. So having this box that does a little everything is a game changer. And the beauty of it too is that when you get to the GTS series, it's not just a small steel box woofer. You can make a ported box, and that thing will hammer as well. So that one woofer wears a lot of hats.
See, when I hear that you saying this, it really intrigues me. Do you remember the first time you saw this woofer and you saw the spec? And you're like, yeah, okay, sure. I'm sure that I had that reaction. Yeah. I'm wondering if you did.
Yeah, as soon as we talked to Matt, like he knows everything. Like he's a very smart dude, engineer. So as soon as you talk to him, you look at the actual quality of the product. You knew right off the bat it was going to be good. And as soon as we started trying them, it blew our mind how much better they were than other woofers in similar areas.
Now, what about power handling? Do these things like a lot of power? How do you set up design your systems around these subs?
Yeah, they take a lot of abuse actually. We have some customers that, not everybody has those customers that can keep the volume knob down or, keep the distortion out of their music. Very, very little failure rate on these woofers. And if there's a failure, it's probably due to abuse. So you never see things just falling apart. They just take the power all day long.
Take the power all day long. Very impressive for the size. So when you're talking with a customer, like, how do you pitch this? Is this something that customers know about, or do you have to kind of say, well, let me show you about, give me a chance to show you these Audiomobile subs? Like, how does that go in the transaction?
Yeah, not many people heard about Audiomobile, so you kind of have to show them. But if you have the expertise, you have customers that will trust you, and usually we try and have a couple of demos around that to show them how much better they are. But we have woofers out in the open. We have an exploded view woofer in our showroom, and we can show people how much bigger the voice coils are compared to an equivalent brand. We'll have another woofer there and say, would you rather have this voice coil, or would you have this massive piston, or do you want to have this one little piece that looks like a toilet paper tube, right? So obviously one's going to handle a little more abuse than the other one. So
I wonder how often you pre-qualify in your back of your mind when you're probing a customer based on the type of vehicle. Does that happen?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the first thing you ask is what type of vehicle you got, right? Mm-hmm. Then in the back of your mind, you're trying to figure out what space you have to work with. And the nice thing is, if you have Audiomobile woofers in your stock room, you can almost guarantee you can just default to that as a good option for it, right? Whether you have all the space in the world or you have really tight space, you can use Audiomobile woofers in that area. You don't have to stock a 15-inch woofer. You can just stock 3 Evo woofers, and that'll do the same job.
I was just going to ask you, what would be your go-to pieces as far as inventory then?
Yeah, Evo woofers are our go-to. I love the GTS woofer. That's my favorite one. It's not quite as shallow as the Evo, but a little more versatile in being able to put it in the ported box. But Evos in truck boxes, and especially paired up with an M car, it is phenomenal what they do.
I was just going to ask you. So Matt was talking a lot about the M car. What's your thoughts on this whole passive radiator situation?
Yeah, I think they were one of the first people to actually pull it off properly and have a good solution and explain how it's done. The fact that I could build a box that looks like it has 4 woofers in it, and it's just 2, but it actually sounds like it performs like 4 woofers.
Does it jam like it's 4?
It's got some output onto it. It's really? Definitely. You're getting 6 dB more just by adding two cones, right? So in the exact same size box, which is a big thing, right? You don't want to gain and build a twice the size box. You want to use the same size box, and you can gain 6 dB out of the same box. You can't go wrong with that.
Last question before I bring back the other boys. You mentioned that they could take a lot of power, but how about efficiency? Do I need a lot of power to get the jam out of these things?
No, that's what's amazing about them is you get the output out of these small little boxes, and normally you lose a lot of efficiency. You gotta add a lot more power to things. You can keep everything in a much more efficient area. With new cars, you can't put multiple 1,000-watt amps in vehicles nowadays without maybe messing up the electrical system, alternator systems, battery resets. So keeping things efficient is a big deal. So when you can keep your couple 10s with 1,000 watts and they sound like you have 2,000 watts going to them, it's a big game changer for sure.
Very, very cool. All right, you've answered my questions. Of course, you did that brilliantly. Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and invite both Ramesh from Importel and Matt from Audiomobile back to this little chat that we're having here. Let's bring these guys back in. All right, there's Ramesh. and Matt. So out of the gate, Matt, are you surprised at all by any of these comments or statements that Mr. Stearns has said in my little interview with him?
No, our brand is incredibly sticky about creating dealers who are the best of breed in their respective markets, and they know when something is truly better. And we're delighted to have people like Jay, Andres, and Dave, and dealers all across Canada, also from the Pacific Northwest to Florida. Our dealers are incredibly loyal because once they try our product and they see that, some of our claims may sound like hyperbolic, but we're not making this stuff up. It really is better, and better in a number of ways, whether it's reliability, sound quality, form factor. Those things, that's really what matters. And we're excited that we continue to build upon this. And our dealers have been very patient. We've had delays, particularly with COVID over the last couple of years. Again,
because you're the only one, Matt, that had delays
Yeah,
with COVID.
exactly.
You're the only one.
Yeah, we're the only ones, right? Although I would submit that we've probably had more crazy cool stuff in the pipeline for much longer than other companies have, and that stuff's finally coming to fruition now. But the cool thing is, it's not a departure from from our core competency, which is great sound quality and small form factors with high power capability. It's just the new Elite and the new Encore products are furthering that and giving dealers the ability to sell even more performance in similar form factor friendly spaces at higher price points.
Ramesh,
Absolutely.
obviously Jay is educated and well versed with the use of Audiomobile products, as you heard from his answers.
Absolutely.
What about dealers who don't know about this? Are you starting to recommend this often when dealers are calling in about this category, subwoofers?
I can't really think of a day where I'm not talking about it more than, at least twice, at least. And often it's not actually in a truck, which is, the truck is the low hanging fruit, right? It's holy cow, how do I get 4 drivers in there? And you can tell Jason's had so many repetitions because it's just so commonplace in their chain, not just his location.
Yeah.
That the answers are sort of, it's almost like your questions weren't even questions because it's just autopilot, right? But what I'm finding is, because I can put an M car into a situation where you're trying to do some OE integration, you've already got 3-way active system going on, you got all this stuff, and you can have a really complex system, but you still, like Jason was alluding to, power costs money, right? Like doubling your power. Oh, we're gonna put 212s in here. Great. Well, it takes twice as much power. Forget this. On top of so we were talking about dimensions and space, I think with Matt a second ago. This whole game is about dimensions. It's dimensions of power or specs of power. It's dimensions of the enclosure size. It's dimensions of piston area or area and piston travel. So, but the part that costs people money, aside from the installation and building the enclosure, is I got to double my power. I need twice as much amplifier to get, the same amount of, to pick up that 6 dB that Jason was talking about. So I talk about it all the time because I'm like, we can use the amp that we already proposed to the dealer. We can use a ultra small enclosure. We now have prefabricated enclosures, which take out that whole, in a trunk vehicle, right? I can just stick it in there, right? So now we have all of these, options, I guess, and it literally isn't available from any other manufacturer, and that's not a thing.
You know what? I'm gonna say this. I actually looked into this leading up to this show, and I have to say, these type of requirements from a specification of size and volume, man, you guys are in a like Matt. You guys are in a class of your own. There's really nothing else that comes close, and that's not hearsay. That's just what it is. Jay, no. I'm gonna put you on the spot here because I know you can answer this. I'm other dealers listening in. Like, talk to me from experience. Top 3, top 4. When you see this vehicle coming up, you're like, boom, Audiomobile, done.
Well, especially every truck. You got a truck coming in, it's going to be an Audiomobile woofer every single day, right? But again, you can use it in so many different areas. Just even building in a vehicle, a small, shallow box that performs like a big box, right? Nobody wants to take up all the room nowadays. It's not the 212s poured in the back of your sedan, People want a small little box, and you can get the performance out of a third of a cubic foot. It's amazing what you can do. And then we add an M car in that same third of a cubic foot or a little bit bigger. You can't go wrong with it. The design process of systems is so much easier than going, where am I going to try and fit this big 12? And now the guy that wants it ported, right? It's the design of systems is much easier when you have this in your arsenal.
Very important for store managers listening. Yeah, exactly.
To that point, efficiency matters, both in terms of how loud, but also the efficiency, as Jason suggested, when you can design a system, get very predictable results, and build that system or that enclosure much faster. This is our, as you can see, is minuscule, 2 inches deep. And this allows you to, if you put this with an Evo 8, you end up with basically an 11-inch piston area that'll work in a third of a cubic foot or smaller. That's just insane.
So Ben, here's an interesting one, because I was just mentioning this to Matt. I went on a witch hunt over the weekend with an Evo 8 and a M-Car 8, and this is a inverse issue that dealers have had, and Jason can comment. To actually build it to spec, to the middle spec, so between 0.3 and 0.4 cubic feet, it's 2 inches to the bottom of it, or to the like flush to the M car, and it's 3.6, if memory serves correct, to the bottom of the Evo. If you build it exactly square to the minimum dimensions, like square, like right, just a perfect rectangular box,
right? Yeah.
It's on the very, very large edge of being, like, it's at the 0.4.
Yeah, we
so your challenge is actually to make it smaller. The challenge is to make that enclosure.
And I love the fact there's no venting on the back piece, that you could put that back wall right up against the woofer.
Right.
That doesn't affect the performance.
Yeah. So I spec'd at 3.7, and it was too small. It was too big.
And to Matt's point, you were talking about dremeling out even that little bump at the back to even get a little bit more. I mean, you talk about extreme savings of space. That's it right there. Jay, did you have any questions for Matt while we have him on here? You saw that video that we showed, that new woofer that's coming out. What do you think about that?
That's super exciting. I can't wait to hear that thing. The 15-inch shallow woofer. That's going to be another game changer. So now somebody says, I don't want to do 210s. Okay, fine. Take this 15, but I can still make it, 6-inch deep sub box for you.
Like, no, but the customer may be like, yeah, okay, what are you talking about? Like,
it's going to be. I'm super excited to play around with those for sure. And just another point too. To give an idea, I've tried every single shallow woofer I get my hands on, whether we sell it or not, just to try. I want to see what's else is out there, right? But there's a lot of brands that they're in my stockroom that I don't sell just because I wanted to try one out, and there's not much that compares to the Audiomobile stuff. There's stuff that'll work in a similar box. They just don't sound as good. There's stuff that'll perform sound-wise, but you need a massive box. Like, there's just nothing else like it.
That means a lot coming from you, Jay, because you sell a lot of premium brands. And, you're saying it's very,
we'd like
very
to refer
unique.
to that as the Goldilocks, right? It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just right. And anybody who understands loudspeakers, it's always designing transducers is a series of trade-offs, and we think we've found sort of the secret magic formula, if you will, because it checks all the boxes of what a dealer wants and what a customer wants, which is low and loud and tiny.
Yeah.
Jason's got the caramel bar, the secret to the caramel bar there at
yeah, he does. And okay, one last question before I let you go, Jay. If you had a wish to create one new item from Audiomobile, what would that be?
I love their Elite Series stuff that he hasn't been able to produce for the last little while. Love that. So I love to see a couple more Elite products coming out. Just because you actually are getting a full-size woofer, they're amazing. But the new 15, that thing is going to be that's going to be the thing. I want to see that thing. I want to see that thing so bad.
Are there going to be passive radiators for the 15?
No, of the 5 new products, there's the new Elite 3208, the new 3210. Those are both approved and will be produced over the next month to 3 months. The 8-inch one will follow a little bit later this summer. The 12 and 15 on the Encore are in production. There will be a new M-Car 300, which will be the 12-inch passive radiator, which you will be able to then put that with an Evo 12 and a 0.75 cubic foot box. So 2 12s and a 3/4 cubic foot box, that's going to be mind
That's
blowing,
crazy.
because
That's
they will
crazy.
fit under the seats of F-150s. And we don't expect to do a passive radiator 15, although you could easily take two MCAR 300s, which would give you about 160 square inches. That's the appropriate amount to be driven by a 15, which is about 130 square inches. So that would be your solution.
That would make for some
By the
unique
roll.
visual installs if you did that.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
That would be cool.
guys.
So
Thank you. First of all, Jason, thank you so much for taking time. We'll let you get back to
Absolutely,
work.
Jason.
And,
Thank you
problem.
very much for
Thanks, Jason.
taking the
Good
time
to
out there.
Take
Good to
care
see you
now.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
And on that note, Matt, I want to thank you for taking the time as well and bringing to us the presentation as well as the news and the new Encore stuff and everything else we talked about, giving us some insights.
Exciting.
I'll give you one last opportunity. I mean, here's what I want to ask, and I'm going to ask it. Why is it only Audiomobile that could pull this off? It's a big question, I know, but I want to know.
So the way I would answer that is that generally nobody sets any world records if they're a decathlete. If you're trying to be good at 10 things, you're not a specialist. You're not going to be setting any world records in the one thing, right? We're a true specialist company. We do low frequency, low and loud, and efficient and reliable. Nobody else has ever really tried to do that. A lot of companies that are mainstream now started out just selling woofers and then they added boxes or whatever. We plan on staying true to our course because if you really want to be great at something, just focus on that one thing.
Well said. Well said. On that note, sir, thank you again for joining us today. Can't thank you enough, and we'll see you on the next one.
Matt, thanks for
I
making
look
all the
forward
time.
to it. Thanks again for all the help, guys. Enjoy
Take
your
care.
summer.
Bye-bye.
You as well.
Romesh, that was an interesting one, man. So happy that we got Jay on board there. So happy that he was there.
That was amazing. It's been a long time since I've seen Jay in person. Obviously, I didn't see him in person this time either, but very cool to hear what all the applications and the experience that they've got with the Audiomobile product.
I'm gonna sum this up. Like guys like Jay, when he comes on and he speaks like that and he gives us that kind of testimonial, like I have to believe him. Obviously,
Well, he's not guessing.
He's not guessing, but
Right?
it's incredible
You know what I
because, like, if I was a
He's
dealer,
not suggesting. It's what they're
no,
actually
he's not
doing.
suggesting.
Right?
This is what he's
Yeah.
doing. I mean, it
Yeah.
certainly seems, from what I gather, from what I learned today, that this is a useful tool to have in your toolbox. And like, why would you not have it, especially for those circumstances where it fits perfectly?
But it fits in everything perfectly. Is my point. Like even if you have a massive, like I don't know if you fit 20 dead bodies in the trunk. I mean, I don't know if that's a memeasurement standard, right? But if you got some
very
old,
scientific,
some old
20
Cadilliac,
cadavers,
some 1976 Cadilliac or whatever.
Yeah,
I think you size them by dead body content, right?
Sure. Yep.
So, but why would why would you want? Like if you could say the guy says, okay, I'm going to take 5 cubic feet. Great, we'll put 4 drivers in. 4 is going to be louder than 2.
I'm going to double up
move
whatever
more
you were
air
thinking,
or
I'm going to save you space. So which one do you want? It's one of the two.
But I don't even have to save you space. I can take the exact same amount of space
And
that you're going to put
maximize.
those 212s or whatever in a prefab box. Let's say you were just going to take something off the shelf and slam it in there, right? And it was going to be, I don't know, 2.5 cubic feet or 2 cubic feet or whatever the hell it was. In 2 cubic feet, we just said that we can put 4 12s in there. However we want to do it. 4 powered, 2 12s, 2 M cars,
you could put a 15
whatever.
You could put 15 and 2 passive radiators in that same space.
Right.
Crazy.
Okay, but we only need 1,000 RMS. Now this is the key. We were talking about 2 12s in this massive 2.5 cubic foot box that require, let's say, whatever, 1,500, 2,000. Okay, now will the electrical system in the vehicle take that? We've got smart alternators in vehicles, right? So if you look at a newer vehicle like I'll talk about my 15 Mustang or 16 Mustang, right? When you're looking at the display, when the vehicle is idling, it disengages the alternator, the clutch in the alternator. So it goes from 14 to 14.3. It drops down,
12.
drops down to 13, and so on and so forth. And then it re-engages and it goes back up. Well, if you're drawing whatever, 100 amps, 200 amps, whatever, right? Well, the alternator is going to be freaking out all the time.
It's going to be a problem.
Some of the newer cars will throw a code or a soft code because the draw is more than the vehicle expects.
The truth
so
is,
all of this stuff is is nonsense that we can avoid. And Jason touched on that earlier.
He did. He totally did.
Right? So we can design these problems for the consumer and the shop out by choosing a different pathway that has a similar result. We don't have to get an argument of, is it the same? Is it not the same? It's bore time stroke, like Matt said. And so how can we get that, like an M car in practice is basically taking a sealed enclosure and turning it into a vented enclosure, or simplified. We're turning it into a tuned enclosure. So that's where this is all relevant to the dealer is, you said, hey, when it fits, I'm saying I can make it fit. If I have something bigger, if the guy wants to give me the space, I will put more piston area in, more stroke for that piston area in, with the same amount of power. So I'm not charging the customer extra for more power that I may not even be able to supply in the electrical system of the car.
Here's what I'm going to say, Ramesh.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, for me to simplify, everything you said is completely valid, along with Jay said. But this is a product that will make your customer happy, man.
Yes,
happier than he thought
absolutely.
he could be.
It'll make you and the customer happy.
Exactly. Everybody's gonna be happy. Exactly. All right, we're gonna wrap it up with that. If you're interested in Audiomobile products, if you happen to be in Canada, you want to get a hold of our friends at Importel. There it is. I'll put it up. Importel.com. Visit them. That's a super unique, super exclusive product. Go check it out. Of course, if you're US tuning in, get a hold of Matt and his team over at Audiomobile, and they'll set you up. Ramesh, this has been a jam. That's a good one.
It's been awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Learned a lot. I'll see you in the next one, buddy.
Likewise. Take care.
And there you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Really cool. Learned a lot. Small space doesn't mean you can't be happy, especially if you're looking at Audiomobile products. Thanks to Jason Stearns from Andres for coming in for that one. Really, really cool to have him on. Okay. I want to remind you to continue tuning in to CMA Networks over the course of the next few days, because we are deep into car audio. This is our first group of brands. We're going right through till Friday, May 27th, each and every day, one-on-one with a car audio brand. Definitely don't want to miss out on that. And of course, if you haven't already checked out, shame on you, CMAnetworks.com. We did a lot of changes to it to make it that much easier for you to peruse our library of videos, whether it's by brand, by category, or even from your favorite trainer. Check it out. CMAnetworks.com. Whole new interface for you to get your learn on. That's it. Thanks for tuning in to this CMA Connected presented by SiriusXM. I'm your host, Ben Wu. Until next time, we connect.
Stop it. Yo, roll it down.
I am.
You don't need a car to listen to SiriusXM. You can listen anywhere. You know that, right?
What? Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud Radio.
Kevin, you could use your phone.
What? What?
Alexa, play Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud Radio on SiriusXM.
What?
This is how I know you're getting old. I guess that was it.
What?